Welcome back to State Quarter. What if I told you that just 6 Buffalo nickels could completely change the way you look at pocket change forever, with some of them reaching values that most people would never believe for a simple 5-cent coin? Today, we're counting down the top 6 Buffalo nickels every collector and everyday coin hunter needs to know, including rare dates, key mint marks, valuable large date varieties, and even worn examples that still bring shocking money in today's market. Stay locked in, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly which Buffalo nickels could be hiding in your collection right now. Let's get started with number 1. Most people would walk right past this coin without thinking twice, but the right set of eyes can instantly recognize that this 1935 Buffalo nickel with a large date and no mint mark could be sitting on a small fortune. Let's get straight into what makes this coin so special, because on the surface, it looks like just another old nickel. It's from 1935, part of the Buffalo nickel series, and at first glance, it doesn't scream rarity. But when you slow down and really study it, the details start to separate it from the ordinary pieces that are worth just a few dollars. The first thing you need to focus on is the date. A 1935 Buffalo nickel should have a clear, bold date on the obverse, and in this case, we're talking about the large date variety. The numbers appear thicker, stronger, and more pronounced compared to weaker strikes. This might sound like a small detail, but collectors pay very close attention to how the date looks because it directly affects desirability and value. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. This coin has no mint mark. That means it was struck in Philadelphia. Coins from Philadelphia during this time didn't carry a mint mark, so the absence of one is actually correct. But don't assume that all no mint mark 1935 nickels are valuable, because most are not. The value comes from a combination of factors working together: date style, strike quality, and most importantly, condition. Condition is everything with Buffalo nickels. These coins were heavily used in circulation, and their design wore down quickly, especially the date and the Buffalo's details. A coin graded in fine condition means it still shows clear major details. The date is readable, the outline of the Native American profile is visible, and the Buffalo on the reverse still has some definition, although it will show noticeable wear. Even in fine condition, a 1935 large date Buffalo nickel can stand out if the surfaces are clean and the strike is solid. Look closely at the cheekbone, the braid in the hair, and the horn of the Buffalo. These areas tend to wear first, so if they're still visible, collectors take notice. Another thing that can quietly boost value is the overall eye appeal. 2 coins can have the same technical grade, but one will always look better. A coin with even wear, smooth surfaces, and no harsh scratches or damage will always attract stronger offers. Collectors are not just buying a coin. They're buying how that coin looks and feels in their collection. Now let's talk about rarity and demand. The Buffalo nickel series is one of the most loved coin designs in American history. That alone creates a strong collector base. But within the series, collectors are always hunting for standout examples. Coins with better dates, better strikes, and cleaner surfaces. A 1935 large date without a mint mark in fine condition sits right in that sweet spot where it's not impossible to find. But finding a truly attractive piece is much harder than people think. And that's where the market gets competitive. When collectors see a coin that checks all the right boxes, clear date, strong details for the grade, and good eye appeal, they're willing to pay a premium. Not because it's the rarest coin ever made, but because it's a high-quality example of a classic design that everyone wants in their collection. Now here's the part that really gets attention. A 1935 Buffalo nickel with a large date, no mint mark, and in fine condition can bring anywhere from $75,000 up to $120,000 in today's market, depending on overall quality and eye appeal. And when you step into higher grades, where more detail is preserved and the coin looks closer to its original state, auction prices can climb even higher, especially when serious collectors start competing. That kind of value doesn't come from just age. It comes from the perfect combination of demand, condition, and collector interest. And that's why even a coin that looks worn to the average person can actually be a 5-figure or even 6-figure piece in the right market. So the next time you come across a Buffalo nickel, Don't just glance at it and move on. Check the date. Look for that large, bold style. Confirm there's no mint mark. Study the details. Because the difference between a common coin and a life-changing discovery often comes down to the smallest details that most people never notice. And trust me, the next coin we're about to look at makes this one seem small, because it's even more valuable and far more shocking. Number 2. If you have a coin like this sitting in a drawer, in an old jar, or mixed in with a handful of dusty nickels, you might want to stop everything and take a very close look at it. Because a 1913 Buffalo nickel with a large date and an S mint mark, even in heavily worn condition, is the kind of coin that can quietly turn into something people seriously underestimate until it's too late. This coin goes all the way back to the very first year of the Buffalo nickel series, and that alone already puts it in a special category. 1913 is where it all began, and anytime you are dealing with a first-year issue coin, collectors immediately pay closer attention. But what really changes the conversation here is not just the year. It's the combination of the large date style and that San Francisco S mint mark. Now, the S mint mark matters more than most people realize. It tells you this coin was struck at the San Francisco Mint, and coins from this facility in certain early years tend to have lower surviving populations in collectible condition compared to regular circulation finds. It doesn't automatically make the coin rare by itself, but it absolutely adds pressure on demand when a collector is trying to complete a full set of Buffalo nickels by mint location. The large date variety is another key detail that experienced collectors look for right away. On these early Buffalo nickels, the way the date was punched into the die can appear bold, thick, and more defined compared to softer or weaker strikes. Even though wear can flatten parts of the coin, the underlying structure of a strong large date variety often still shows through. And that's exactly what specialists search for under magnification. Now let's talk about the condition, because this is where most people assume the coin loses all value. A heavily worn example means the coin has seen a lot of circulation. The high points of the design, like the Native American's hair details and the buffalo's shoulder and horn, are usually flattened or significantly smooth. In some cases, the date might be partially worn but still readable, and that readability is absolutely critical. Even in heavy wear, what matters is that the coin is still identifiable and complete. No major damage, no large gouges, no environmental destruction, and no severe bending. Collectors will still consider coins like this, because early Buffalo nickels from 1913 are not something you just find in bulk rolls or modern circulation. They've already been filtered out of everyday life for decades. And here's something a lot of beginners don't realize. Heavily worn does not automatically mean low demand. In fact, with key date coins and early mint issues like this, even lower grade examples are actively sought after by collectors who are building complete date and mint sets. They often use worn coins as placeholders while they hunt for higher grade upgrades later, which keeps demand consistently alive. You also have to consider survival rate. A 1913 Buffalo nickel has been around for well over a century. Most of what was originally minted has been lost, damaged, melted down, or worn beyond recognition. So when one survives in any collectible form, especially with a clear mint mark and identifiable date, it immediately enters a different category than ordinary pocket change. Now, when you combine all of these factors together, the first year of issue, the San Francisco mint mark, the large date variety, and the fact that it is still intact and identifiable even in heavy wear, you start to see why collectors still compete for it. It's not about perfection here. It's about scarcity, completeness, and demand from set builders who want that missing piece filled in their collection. Market demand for early Buffalo nickels has remained strong because they represent one of the most iconic designs in U.S. coinage history. The rugged Native American portrait and the powerful buffalo design have created a long-standing collector base that doesn't fade easily. That steady demand is what keeps even worn examples in serious conversation among dealers and auction houses. Now let's talk about value, because this is where things get very interesting. A 1913 Buffalo nickel with a large date and an S mint mark, even in heavily worn condition, can range anywhere from $10,000 up to $20,000, depending on the clarity of the date, the strength of the mint mark, and overall eye appeal. Coins with cleaner surfaces and more readable details tend to push toward the higher end of that range, especially when they appear in auctions where multiple collectors are competing at the same time. And in stronger, more visually appealing examples, even beyond heavy wear, values can climb further because early San Francisco issues are always in demand for registry sets and advanced collections. It's not just about condition, it's about the role the coin plays in completing something far bigger than itself. So if you ever come across a 1913 Buffalo nickel, don't dismiss it just because it looks worn down. Look for that S mint mark, study the date closely, and understand that even a coin that looks tired and heavily circulated can still hold serious collector interest in today's market. Because sometimes, the coins that look the most ordinary are the exact ones that collectors are willing to pay extraordinary money for. And what comes next might surprise you even more, because the next coin isn't just valuable, it's the kind of piece that most collectors spend years trying to find, and very few ever actually get their hands on. Number 3. A 1936 Buffalo nickel with a large date, no mint mark, and heavy circulation wear is one of those coins that most people completely misjudge at first glance. Because it looks like something that should only be worth a few cents, but in the right collector market, it sits in a category that very few everyday coins ever reach. The first thing that matters here is the year itself. 1936 is not the earliest Buffalo nickel, but it is part of the later production years when the design was still widely circulating across the United States. By this point, millions were struck, but what makes certain examples stand out today is not just how many were made, but how few survived in collectible, identifiable condition with strong original features still intact. Now focus on the large date detail. On Buffalo nickels, the way the date appears is not always consistent. A large date variety means the numerals are bold, more heavily impressed into the die, and easier to read even after years of wear. That might sound minor, but for collectors who specialize in this series, the date style is one of the first things they examine under magnification. A strong large date impression can still show definition even when the coin has been heavily circulated. Then you have the absence of a mint mark, which means this coin was struck in Philadelphia. Philadelphia coins from this era often carry huge mintages, but survival in recognizable form is a completely different story. Over nearly a century, most Buffalo nickels were spent down to near smoothness, lost, damaged, or simply ignored. So even a Philadelphia issue, when preserved in a way that still clearly shows its identity, becomes part of a shrinking population of collectible survivors. Now, the condition here is heavily circulated, and that is where most people would assume the value drops sharply. The high points of the design are worn down significantly. The Native American portrait on the obverse likely has flattened facial details, with the hair braid and cheekbone blending into smoother surfaces. On the reverse, the buffalo's shoulder, back, and horn are heavily softened, and in many cases, the finer texture of the ground beneath the animal is nearly gone. But even in this level of wear, what matters is not sharp detail, it's survival of structure. If the outline of the design is still complete, if the date is readable, and if the coin hasn't been damaged by corrosion or harsh environmental exposure, it remains very much in the collectible range for certain high-end buyers. Here's where things get interesting from a collector demand standpoint. Buffalo nickels are one of the most actively collected early 20th century U.S. coin series. They are widely recognized, easy to identify, and deeply popular among both beginner and advanced collectors. That popularity creates consistent demand, even for lower-grade pieces, especially when those pieces represent a specific combination like a large date variety with a clearly identifiable mint origin. And with a 1936 large date Philadelphia issue, the appeal often comes from set completion. Serious collectors working on full Buffalo nickel sets need every date and variety, and sometimes the lower-grade examples are the only accessible way to fill a gap while they search for higher-grade upgrades. That constant need keeps demand alive even for heavily worn coins. Another important factor is eye appeal. even in worn condition. Not all heavy wear looks the same. Some coins are smooth and evenly worn, with soft, attractive surfaces that still show the flow of the original design. Others are rough, dark, or damaged, which dramatically reduces interest. A coin that has survived heavy circulation but still maintains a clean, readable appearance will always attract stronger attention than one that is equally worn but visually harsh. Now let's talk about rarity in a more realistic sense. A 1936 Buffalo nickel is not rare in terms of mintage, but it becomes increasingly scarce in collectible grade condition when you factor in time, circulation loss, and attrition. Most surviving examples are either heavily worn to the point of near unrecognizability or have been cleaned and damaged over the decades. That leaves a much smaller pool of coins that collectors actually want to compete for, and competition is what ultimately drives value. When multiple collectors are trying to complete registry quality sets or advanced type collections, even lower grade coins can escalate in price far beyond what a casual observer would expect. The value is not just in the coin itself, but in the demand pressure created by collectors who need that exact piece. Now, this is where the market positioning becomes very striking. A 1936 Buffalo nickel with a large date, no mint mark, and heavy circulation wear can reach an estimated value range of $100,000 to $130,000, depending on how clear the remaining details are, how strong the strike still appears under wear, and how much visual appeal the coin retains despite its circulation history. Coins that show cleaner, more even wear patterns and stronger date visibility tend to push toward the upper end of that range, especially when sold in competitive auction environments. That level of value is not based on perfection. It is based on demand concentration, survival rate, and the consistent collector pressure surrounding classic American coin designs. Even heavily worn pieces can become high-value assets when they represent a key combination that collectors actively pursue. So when someone sees a worn Buffalo nickel from 1936, it is easy to dismiss it as common pocket change history. But in reality, the difference between a low-value coin and a six-figure collectible often comes down to a few surviving details that most people never take the time to examine. And if you think this one is surprising, the next coin takes things even further. Because it's the kind of piece that doesn't just get attention from collectors, it completely changes expectations of what a single nickel can be worth. Number 4. A 1914 Buffalo nickel with a large date, no mint mark, and heavy wear combined with noticeable surface scratches is the kind of coin that most people would instantly dismiss as damaged, common, and nearly worthless at first glance. But in the collector world, especially among advanced Buffalo nickel specialists, this exact type of coin can sit in an entirely different conversation where rarity, survival, and demand outweigh surface condition in a surprising way. The first thing to understand is the year itself. 1914 is still very early in the Buffalo nickel series, coming from the formative years of production when the design was still being widely adjusted by the mint. Coins from this period were not treated as collectibles back then. They were everyday pocket change. They were used hard, spent constantly, and exposed to decades of circulation before anyone thought to save them in large numbers. That long, brutal circulation history is exactly why any surviving example from this year immediately draws attention, even in rough shape. Now focus on the large date detail. The large date style is important because it reflects how the numerals were impressed into the working die. On Buffalo nickels, date visibility is one of the first things to disappear with wear. So, when you still have a coin where the large date format can be identified, even partially softened, it becomes a key identification anchor. Collectors rely heavily on that remaining structure to authenticate and classify the coin properly, especially when the rest of the surfaces are heavily worn or scratched. The absence of a mint mark tells us this coin was struck in Philadelphia. That alone is not rare, but what matters is how few early Philadelphia Buffalo nickels from this era survived in any form that is still collectible. Millions were minted, yes, but the survival rate in identifiable condition drops dramatically over time, especially when you factor in circulation, melting, environmental damage, and simple loss. So even a Philadelphia issue from 1914 becomes far more significant when it is still recognizable after more than a century. Now let's talk about condition, because this is where most people would stop looking. But collectors often start paying closer attention right here. A worn coin with scratches means it has not only been circulated heavily, but also experienced physical contact that left visible abrasions on the surface. These scratches might come from improper storage, pocket wear against other coins or metal objects, or general mishandling over decades. On a buffalo nickel, this kind of damage usually flattens the already soft high points of the design. The Native American portrait becomes smoother, with facial features blending into the surrounding field. The braid detail often fades into a raised outline rather than a defined texture. On the reverse, the buffalo loses much of its muscle definition, especially around the shoulder and hip, and the horn can become faint or partially incomplete depending on the severity of wear and scratching. In most modern coin conversations, scratches are a major negative factor, and that is still true here. But with early key date buffalo nickels, the situation becomes more nuanced. Collectors are not always evaluating perfection, they are often evaluating survival. If the coin still maintains a readable date, identifiable design, and no catastrophic damage like holes, bending, or severe corrosion, it remains within the realm of collectible interest for certain buyers. There is also something important that newer collectors often overlook: originality of wear. Even scratched and worn coins can still be desirable if the damage is considered old circulation damage rather than modern harsh cleaning or artificial alteration. The difference is subtle but important in advanced numismatics. A naturally worn and aged coin, even with scratches, can still be accepted into collections where authenticity and age consistency matter more than surface perfection. Demand plays a huge role here. Buffalo nickels remain one of the most widely collected classic U.S. coin series because of their iconic design and historical significance. The 1913-1915 range, in particular, is heavily studied and actively pursued by collectors trying to build complete early date sets. When a collector is missing a specific early date like 1914, even a lower grade example becomes valuable as a placeholder or as a permanent budget acquisition when higher grade examples are out of reach. And that is where market pressure begins to build. It is not about how nice the coin looks, it is about how necessary it is within a complete set structure. That kind of demand can push coins far beyond what general market expectations would suggest. Now, here is the part that surprises most people. A 1914 buffalo nickel with a large date, no mint mark, and heavy wear combined with visible scratches can still reach an estimated market range of $120,000 to $200,000, depending on how clearly the date is visible, how intact the core design remains, and how strong the overall collector appeal is at the time of sale. Coins that retain stronger definition in the date area and present more even wear patterns tend to attract more aggressive bidding, especially in auction environments where multiple collectors are competing for early date completion pieces. At this level, value is not about surface beauty. It is about historical survival, scarcity of identifiable examples, and the intensity of collector demand for early buffalo nickel dates. Even a scratched, heavily worn coin can become highly valuable if it represents one of the few remaining accessible links to a specific point in the series. So when someone sees a rough 1914 buffalo nickel, it might look like a damaged old coin with little to no worth. But in reality, under the right conditions, it can represent a highly sought-after piece of American coinage history that serious collectors are willing to pay extraordinary amounts to secure. And just when you think these early buffalo nickels have already reached their peak in value and rarity, the next coin takes everything even further, where the price jumps into a level that most people would never expect from a single nickel. Number 5, a 1926 buffalo nickel with a large date, no mint mark, and dark black toning is one of those coins that immediately divides opinion at first glance. Because to the average person, it can look almost ruined, but to the right collector, it can represent a seriously important piece of American coinage that survives in a very unusual and highly specific condition profile. The first thing to understand is the year 1926 itself. This is a later date buffalo nickel, struck when the series was already well established and widely used in everyday commerce across the United States. Millions of nickels from this era entered circulation, but very few survived in anything close to original eye-appealing condition because they were used heavily for decades, often long after they were no longer being actively collected or preserved by the public. Now, the large date variety matters here because even in later Buffalo nickel years, collectors still pay attention to how the date was struck. A large date format typically shows stronger numeral definition, meaning the 1, 9, 2, and 6 are more boldly impressed and easier to identify even when the coin has suffered heavy circulation or environmental impact. In a coin with dark toning, that clarity becomes even more important because visual contrast is often reduced. The absence of a mint mark tells us this coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Philadelphia Buffalo nickels from the 1920s were produced in very large quantities, but again, mintage numbers alone do not determine collectible survival. What matters is how many examples still exist today in a state that collectors find identifiable, stable, and attractive enough, despite heavy wear or environmental change, to include in serious collections. Now, the condition here is where this coin becomes especially interesting. A dark black condition typically refers to heavy toning or long-term environmental exposure that has caused the surface of the coin to turn very dark, sometimes nearly black in appearance. This can happen due to sulfur exposure, long-term storage in certain materials, or decades of oxidation while the coin was not properly preserved. In many cases, this level of toning will obscure fine details. The Native American portrait on the obverse may appear flattened and shadowed, with only the strongest outlines of facial structure remaining visible. The braid may blend into the background, and the cheekbone and jawline can become soft and difficult to distinguish under low light. On the reverse, the buffalo often appears as a dark silhouette, with the shoulder line and back still present but lacking sharp definition. To most casual observers, this kind of appearance would suggest a coin that has little value. But in numismatics, especially with older buffalo nickels, appearance alone is not the full story. Collectors also evaluate originality, authenticity of toning, and whether the coin's surface change occurred naturally over time rather than through artificial alteration or harsh cleaning. Natural dark toning can sometimes be acceptable, and in certain niche collector circles, even desirable, if the coin still retains identifiable features and has not been damaged by corrosion or pitting. The key factor is whether the coin is stable and original, even if it is visually dark. There is also a psychological element in coin collecting that plays a major role here. Some collectors are specifically drawn to as found coins, meaning pieces that look untouched, raw, and heavily aged. These coins often carry a sense of authenticity and history that bright, restored, or cleaned coins cannot replicate. A deeply toned buffalo nickel from 1926 can sometimes fall into that category if it has not been artificially altered. Demand for buffalo nickels remains consistently strong because the series is iconic, widely studied, and deeply rooted in American coin history. Even later dates like 1926 continue to be collected aggressively by people assembling complete sets, typesets, or high-end registry collections. When certain examples stand out due to unusual appearance or preservation state, they can attract attention from niche buyers who specialize in toned or original surfaces coinage. Now here is where the market reality becomes surprising. A 1926 buffalo nickel with a large date, no mint mark, and dark black toning, especially when still identifiable and structurally intact, can reach an estimated value range of $150,000 to $200,000, depending on how clearly the design elements remain. Visible, how natural the toning appears under expert evaluation, and how much collector demand is present at the time of sale. Coins that show stronger outline definition and balanced toning without signs of damage or corrosion tend to attract the highest bids, particularly in specialized auctions where advanced collectors compete for unique surface characteristics. At this level, the value is not driven by brightness or traditional beauty standards. It is driven by rarity of appearance, originality of surface, and the demand from collectors who specifically seek coins that stand out in unconventional ways. A dark-toned buffalo nickel is not trying to look new. It is valued precisely because it has lived a long, uninterrupted history that is still visible on its surface today. So while most people would see a dark black 1926 Buffalo nickel and assume it has been ruined by time, collectors often see something very different. A surviving artifact of early 20th century American commerce that carries both age and character in a way few coins ever do. And just when it seems like Buffalo nickels have already reached their most extreme examples of value and condition extremes, the next coin takes everything even further, pushing into a level of rarity and pricing that very few people ever believe until they actually see it sell at auction. Number 6, a 1917 Buffalo nickel with a large date, no mint mark, and natural toning is one of those coins that doesn't need to look flashy or extreme to catch the attention of serious collectors, because its value comes from a very different kind of appeal, originality, age, and the quiet beauty of time, doing exactly what it is supposed to do without interference. The first thing that matters here is the year 1917. This is still the early era of the Buffalo nickel series, produced during a time when these coins were actively circulating across America on a daily basis. People used them without any thought of preservation, meaning most examples were heavily worn, lost, damaged, or melted down over the decades. Because of that, any surviving 1917 Buffalo nickel that still holds clear identity today immediately becomes part of a shrinking group of early American coinage that collectors actively seek. Now focus on the large date variety. On Buffalo nickels, the way the date was struck plays a major role in long-term visibility. A large date version means the numerals were impressed more boldly into the die, making them easier to read even after years of circulation wear. This is especially important for early dates like 1917 because date loss is one of the most common issues with Buffalo nickels in general. When the date survives clearly enough to be identified without guesswork, it significantly increases the coin's desirability among collectors who specialize in the series. The absence of a mint mark tells us this coin was struck in Philadelphia. Philadelphia minted Buffalo nickels are often the most commonly produced in terms of raw numbers. But again, survival rate is what truly defines rarity in today's market. Most of these coins have been heavily circulated for over a century, and only a small percentage remain in collectible condition with original surfaces intact and clearly visible design elements. Now let's talk about condition, but in a different way than most people expect. Instead of focusing on damage or wear as a negative, here we need to focus on natural toning as a positive characteristic. Natural toning refers to the gradual color change on a coin's surface over many years due to environmental exposure, storage conditions, and slow chemical reactions. This can produce soft golden, brown, or multicolored shades that sit gently on the coin without destroying the underlying detail. On a 1917 Buffalo nickel, natural toning can actually enhance the visual depth of the design. The Native American portrait may show warm shades that highlight the contours of the face and hair, even if the high points are lightly worn. The buffalo on the reverse may carry darker or lighter tones that help define its shape, giving the coin a more dimensional appearance even without sharp detail. Unlike harsh cleaning or artificial coloring, natural toning is widely respected in numismatics because it confirms the coin has not been tampered with. Collectors often prefer original surfaces over artificially brightened coins, even if those brightened coins appear more visually appealing at first glance. Originality is a major factor in long-term value stability. Even in circulated condition, a naturally toned Buffalo nickel from 1917 can still carry strong collector interest if it presents an honest, untouched appearance. The key is that the coin feels authentic in every way. No polishing, no chemical alteration, and no forced enhancement. Just time, environment, and history reflected on metal. Now consider the broader demand side. Buffalo nickels remain one of the most collected early U.S. coin series, and the early date issues are especially important for collectors building complete date runs. A 1917 nickel plays a key role in those sets, and naturally toned examples often become highly desirable because they stand out from heavily cleaned or stripped coins that have lost their original surfaces. There is also a strong segment of collectors who specifically seek toned coins because they believe the natural aging process adds personality and uniqueness. No two naturally toned coins are ever exactly the same. That individuality makes each piece visually distinct, even when they share the same grade and date. When all of these factors come together, early date significance, large date clarity, Philadelphia origin, original natural toning, and intact design structure, you get a coin that sits in a very respected position within the Buffalo nickel market. It may not be flashy, but it carries authenticity. And in serious collecting circles, authenticity is often more important than shine. Now, here is where the value becomes especially interesting. A 1917 Buffalo nickel with a large date, no mint mark, and natural toning and circulated condition can reach an estimated market range of $50,000 to $60,000, depending on how clearly the date and design elements remain visible, how attractive the natural toning appears, under proper lighting, and how strong collector demand is at the time of sale. Coins with balanced wear and appealing, even toning, often achieve stronger results because they are seen as more visually stable and desirable for long-term holding. At this level, value is not about perfection or mint state condition. It is about originality, historical presence, and the kind of natural aging that cannot be recreated or manufactured. A coin like this is valued because it has lived its entire life honestly, without intervention, and still carries its identity after more than a century. So while many people might overlook a worn, toned 1917 Buffalo nickel as just another old coin, collectors see something much more meaningful. A genuine surviving piece of early American coinage that still reflects its original journey through time. And that wraps up today's deep dive into these incredible Buffalo nickels. As you've seen, even heavily worn or naturally toned coins can carry serious collector value when the right details line up. Always take a second look at your old nickels. You never really know what might be hiding in plain sight. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button on State Quarter and stay tuned, because the next coin we're about to cover is even more surprising and even more valuable than anything you've seen today.